The summer heat was a suffocating blanket over Havenwood, Kansas, the kind that made the asphalt shimmer and the cicadas drone like a broken record. For Sheriff Brody, a man etched with the lines of 50-odd years of prairie dust and quiet disappointment, it was just another Tuesday. He'd seen his fair share of bizarre in Havenwood: lost tourists, runaway teenagers, a whole herd of cows that once mysteriously ended up in the high school gym. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the call that came in just after dawn from Old Man Hemlock. Hemlock was a relic, a gnarled old farmer whose theories about aliens and ley lines were as legendary as his homegrown peaches. But his voice on the phone wasn't rambling. It was a tight, panicked whisper. "Sheriff, you gotta come. They're here. They've landed." Brody, a man of logic and concrete facts, sighed. "They who, Eldridge? The IRS again?" "No, Sheriff. The circles. The perfect circles. In my corn." Brody drove his battered Ford pickup, the Kansas sun already blazing, down the dusty farm roads. He expected a few trampled stalks, maybe a prank by some bored teenagers. What he found made his breath catch in his throat, a cold knot forming in his gut despite the heat. Stretching across Old Man Hemlock's prize cornfield, perfectly etched into the towering green stalks, was a colossal, intricate geometric pattern. It wasn't just a circle, it was a series of interconnected rings, spirals, and what looked like impossible fractals, covering acres. The stalks were flattened with a terrifying precision, bent at the joints, not broken. It looked like the work of an artist or a machine, but no human could have done this overnight, undetected, with such flawless execution. "See?" Hemlock croaked, his eyes wide, pointing a trembling finger. "I told you, not from around here." Brody, a skeptic down to his bones, shook his head. His mind raced for a rational explanation. Prank? Cult? But the sheer scale and complexity defied any logical answer. This wasn't some college kid with a plank and a rope. This was something else. He knew just who to call. Sarah Jenkins, the bright-eyed agricultural researcher who'd recently moved to Havenwood, full of big city university ideas about sustainable farming. She was sharp, precise, and had a way of cutting through the rural superstitions. Sarah arrived within the hour, her face a mix of professional curiosity and thinly veiled awe. She knelt amidst the flattened corn, her specialized equipment whirring softly. "Sheriff, this is extraordinary." Her usual scientific detachment wavered. She ran her hand along a bent stalk. "The nodes are elongated, and I'm getting some highly unusual electromagnetic readings, stronger than anything I've ever seen on a farm, or frankly, anywhere outside a power plant." She pulled out a small device, its screen flickering with strange data. "And these stalks, they haven't been broken. They've been bent, almost like they were superheated then immediately cooled, or some kind of intense pressure was applied without damaging the cellular structure." She pointed to tiny, shimmering particles clinging to some stalks, almost invisible. "And these, I don't even know what these are." Old Man Hemlock, meanwhile, was mumbling near the edge of the circle, his eyes fixed on the center. "The land's waking up," he whispered, mostly to himself. "Always knew it'd happen one day. They always leave a warning." Brody dismissed it as the ramblings of an old eccentric, but a chill ran down his spine when Sarah, standing at the exact center of the immense pattern, paused. She frowned, pressing her hand against the disturbed earth. "Can you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. A hum, a low, unsettling hum, coming from deep underground. The local news crews, like vultures to fresh meat, descended upon Havenwood by midday, their choppers buzzing overhead, turning the quiet town into a media circus. Suddenly, Old Man Hemlock's bizarre circle was national news. Brody felt a prickle of unease. This was no prank. This was just the beginning, and something deep within the Kansas earth was clearly not happy. The initial ripple of curiosity that had drawn news vans and curious tourists to Havenwood quickly morphed into a churning wave of unease. Old Man Hemlock's solitary crop circle was no longer an isolated incident. Over the next few days, more appeared. Not just one or two, but a series of increasingly intricate designs that seemed to bloom overnight in the surrounding fields, each more complex than the last. They formed a pattern, not random at all, but one that subtly, unsettlingly, stretched towards a distant, forgotten Native American burial mound that sat on a neglected patch of land at the edge of Havenwood. Sheriff Brody felt a growing dread in his gut. The local farmers were in an uproar. their harvest threatened, their quiet lives shattered. The tourists, initially giddy with excitement, now milled about with a palpable undercurrent of fear. And then came the others. Dr. Evelyn Reed arrived in a dusty, overloaded SUV, looking like she'd stepped out of a history book. In her late 60s, with a wild mane of silver hair and eyes that seemed to see more than they let on, she was a renowned para-archaeologist and linguist, specializing in ancient symbols and folklore. She'd seen the news, and her intuition, she claimed, had pulled her to Havenwood. She promptly set up a makeshift camp near the affected fields, armed with strange charts and a notepad filled with cryptic scribbles. "These aren't pranks, Sheriff," she declared, her voice raspy but firm as she peered at a new circle. "These are messages, a language, and a very old one at that." Adding to the chaos, a group of self-proclaimed online conspiracy theorists and UFO enthusiasts also descended. They were annoying as hell, setting up tripods and night vision cameras, arguing loudly about alien signals and government cover-ups. Brody just wanted them gone, but their cameras, inadvertently, captured something chilling. Faint, rhythmic pulsing glows originating from within the new formations at night. Lights that were absolutely not natural and had no discernible source. Sarah Jenkins, meanwhile, was growing increasingly disturbed. Her scientific instruments were picking up even stranger data from the newly formed circles. The plants inside them weren't just bent. They were exhibiting a wildly accelerated growth cycle. A stalk of corn that should take weeks to mature was doing so in days, then withering just as quickly, as if an unseen force was pushing them into hyperspeed. Her soil samples revealed microscopic, unidentifiable crystalline structures embedded deep within the earth of the formations. "It's like something is supercharging them," she mused, staring at the data. "But what?" Dr. Reed, with her vast knowledge of ancient cultures, spent hours poring over the patterns. She compared them to obscure local legends she'd found online, linking them to symbols of protection, territory, and most unsettlingly, warnings of awakening primal forces. "This pattern," she explained to a bewildered Sarah, tracing a complex spiral, "it's reminiscent of ancient earth glyphs. These aren't meant for us, they're meant for something else." Sheriff Brody was finding it harder and harder to cling to his skepticism. The sheer impossibility of it all, coupled with the bizarre light phenomena and Sarah's scientific anomalies, was chipping away at his logical mind. But it was the nights that truly got to him. When patrolling the deserted fields, the vast cornstalks looming like silent sentinels, he'd catch strange, fleeting shadows at the edge of his vision. Just a flicker, a momentary distortion of the moonlight, too quick to identify, too persistent to ignore. He started checking his rearview mirror more often than he cared to admit. Havenwood was no longer just a quiet town. It was becoming a stage for something utterly inexplicable. And the curtain was just beginning to rise. The unsettling hum Sarah had felt at the center of the first crop circle was no longer an isolated phenomenon. It had become a persistent, low thrum, like a giant, invisible machine buried deep beneath Havenwood. And with each new, impossibly complex crop circle that appeared, the hum grew stronger, the tension in the town practically vibrating in the summer air. What truly sent shivers down Sheriff Brody's spine wasn't just the sheer impossibility of the formations, or the increasingly bizarre behavior of the online theorists. It was the fact that these new, terrifyingly precise patterns were forming closer to residential areas. First, a field just behind the elementary school. Then, another encircling the edge of Sarah Jenkins's rented farmhouse, creating a bizarre, unwelcome moat of flattened corn around her home. And worst of all, a chillingly familiar spiral had appeared less than a quarter mile from Brody's own childhood home, a small, unassuming house he'd inherited from his folks. The feeling of being watched, of something unseen drawing closer, was becoming overwhelming. The electromagnetic readings Sarah was getting from the fields were now so high, they were causing the town's older power grid to flicker erratically, and radios would suddenly burst into static. Sarah, usually a bastion of scientific calm, was showing the strain. Her meticulous equipment, designed for precise agricultural analysis, was malfunctioning wildly near the new circles, its screens often freezing on distorted images or displaying unintelligible codes. She wasn't sleeping. Or rather, she was, but her sleep offered no respite. Her nights were plagued by vivid, unsettling dreams, a dizzying kaleidoscope of geometric patterns that mirrored the varied designs appearing in the fields. She saw intricate spirals forming, felt the ground beneath her feet hum, and had an overwhelming, chilling sense of being meticulously observed by something vast and ancient. She started waking up in a cold sweat, reaching for a notepad to sketch these patterns from her dreams, only to find they eerily resembled sections of the mysterious crop circles she'd been studying. It was like her subconscious was being fed blueprints from an unseen architect. Meanwhile, Dr. Evelyn Reed, energized by the escalating mystery, was tirelessly working to decipher the patterns. Squinting through thick glasses, she'd spend hours tracing the lines, comparing them to ancient Native American petroglyphs and obscure runic symbols from obscure historical texts. She finally had a breakthrough. "These aren't just patterns, Sheriff," she announced one afternoon, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and dread. "They are a language, as I suspected, and I've translated fragments of the newer formations." She paused, her eyes wide. "They speak of a forgotten slumber and the land reclaiming what is lost. This isn't just a signal, it's a warning, or a protective barrier, or perhaps even a beacon, but for what, I'm not yet sure." Sheriff Brody's skepticism had all but evaporated. His logical mind, usually his anchor, was slipping. The final straw came late one night while he was patrolling. His patrol car's engine sputtered and the radio died. He looked out into the vast, silent fields and saw it. Not a shadow, not a flicker, but his own livestock. All the cows in the nearby pasture, usually scattered and grazing, were standing perfectly still, synchronized, all facing the exact same direction, towards the Native American burial mound. Their breath plumed in the cool night air, and they remained frozen like statues for a full minute, before suddenly, as if on cue, scattering in a synchronized stampede. And then he heard them. Faint, ethereal whispers, carried on the gentle Kansas wind through the rustling cornstalks, just at the edge of his hearing, like 100 voices speaking at once, unintelligibly. He wasn't alone. The next morning, the last shred of normalcy in Havenwood snapped. A local resident, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet old lady who lived alone, woke to find her beloved dachshund, Sparky, gone. He'd never wandered far from home. But there, stretching across her backyard, just meters from her back porch, was a fresh, still humming crop circle. No footprints leading in or out, just the chillingly perfect pattern. The community was terrified. Families, usually rooted deeply in this land, started quietly packing their bags, leaving Havenwood behind. The whispers in the corn weren't just a feeling anymore. They were real, and they were getting closer. The hum that had been an unsettling background noise in Havenwood now throbbed with a deeper, more resonant frequency, vibrating through the very soles of their feet. It was a sound that seemed to come from the deepest core of the earth, echoing in their bones. The exodus from Havenwood had become a steady stream. Empty houses stared out with vacant eyes, and the few remaining residents huddled indoors, their faces etched with fear. Then it happened. Overnight, a new crop circle appeared. But this wasn't just another pattern in another field. This was the largest, most mind-bogglingly intricate design yet, a monstrous mandala sprawling over dozens of acres, and it was located directly over the ancient Native American burial mound that Dr. Reed had identified. As the sun rose, a faint, sickly green light pulsed rhythmically from its very center, a beacon of something ancient and horrifying. The ground around the mound began to vibrate subtly, a low tremor that caused dust to rise in plumes and sent cracks snaking across the dry earth of nearby roads. The air grew thick with a strange, sweet, yet deeply unsettling odor, like decaying vegetation mixed with something metallic. This scent seemed to emanate directly from the previous crop circles. Sarah, driven by a desperate need for answers, went to check on them. What she found turned her stomach. The corn in all the previously formed circles had withered and decayed at an astonishing, unnatural rate. It wasn't just dead. It looked as if all life had been violently sucked from it, leaving behind brittle, skeletal husks. Sarah's eyes, red-rimmed from lack of sleep, darted between her complex mapping software and the real-time sensor readings. She overlaid the coordinates of every single crop circle, a grid of eerie perfection. Her jaw dropped. When connected, all the individual circles, regardless of their complexity or size, formed a single, colossal network. It wasn't just a series of random patterns, it was a vast, intricate circuit board, or perhaps a gargantuan antenna with the burial mound at its absolute epicenter. "It's a system," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "They're not just drawing pictures, they're directing something." Dr. Reed, her face pale but her eyes alight with grim understanding, finally deciphered the full message from the colossal circle at the mound. The new symbols, combined with the earlier fragments, painted a chilling picture. The breath returns. The earth consumes. Do not disturb the slumber of the forgotten. She theorized that the circles were an ancient primal warning. "This isn't alien contact in the way we understand it," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. "This is older. This is something connected to the very core of the earth itself, a primordial intelligence. And we, with our farms and our cities, have disturbed its long-forgotten slumber." She believed the patterns were either an attempt by this entity to re-establish its boundaries, or, more terrifyingly, a desperate beacon, a call for something to emerge. Sheriff Brody, a man who once scoffed at ghost stories, felt a cold dread settle over him that no amount of logic could dispel. He'd been looking into local archives, searching for anything, any anomaly. Tucked away in a dusty file, he found a missing person report from the 1950s. A local farmer named Silas Blackwood had vanished without a trace in the very field where the first crop circle had appeared, dismissed as a runaway at the time. Brody felt a knot tighten in his gut. Just then, Old Man Hemlock appeared at Brody's office door, his eyes wide and haunted. "Silas," he croaked. "He saw him, Sheriff. Back then, the lights, the whispers, just like now. Said the corn ate him. Nobody believed me then. I just hid." The old farmer's confession, a half-century-old secret, sealed Brody's chilling realization. This wasn't new. This was a cycle. As darkness fell, the green light emanating from the burial mound intensified, pulsing with a slow, deliberate beat. And the low, resonating hum that filled the air now caused more than just electrical disturbances. It made the very fillings in Brody's teeth ache, a sound so deep it felt like it was tearing at the fabric of reality itself. Whatever was coming, it was closer than ever. The air in Havenwood that night was a suffocating shroud of dread, thick with the overpowering, low hum emanating from the colossal crop circle at the burial mound. It felt like the very fabric of reality was straining, a taut wire about to snap. Sheriff Brody, Sarah Jenkins, and Dr. Evelyn Reed stood on the periphery, their flashlights cutting weak beams through the heavy atmosphere. The pulsing green light from the mound intensified, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced like specters in the dying light. Then the impossible happened. The ground around the burial mound began to rise and fall, subtly at first, then with an undeniable, rhythmic motion, like a massive, unseen chest breathing. Cracks, thin as spiderwebs, snaked across the dry earth, widening with each unsettling pulsation. A low, guttural groan, barely audible beneath the hum, seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. Sarah, her hands trembling but her eyes glued to her flickering instruments, let out a gasp. "It's a massive energy spike," she choked out, pointing at the chaotic readings. "Coming from deep beneath the mound. It's not on any known spectrum. It's alien, but not from space. It's Earth." A horrifying realization dawned on her. The crop circles weren't just patterns. They weren't just a language or a warning. They were a mechanism, a vast, organic circuit board designed to harness and direct this raw, ancient energy, perhaps to awaken something, or worse, to feed it. Dr. Reed, her voice a strained whisper, confirmed Sarah's terrifying theory. The forgotten slumber. It refers to an entity, not alien in the conventional sense, not from the stars, but something primordial, intrinsically connected to the earth itself. We, with our farming, our digging, our constant interference, we've disturbed it. The circles were either its attempt to re-establish a boundary, a desperate plea to be left alone, or a direct call, a call for something to emerge. Her words hung in the air, a chilling prophecy. Sheriff Brody, his trusty sidearm feeling woefully inadequate against an awakening planet, watched in silent horror as the green light from the mound reached a blinding crescendo. And then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, ethereal, wispy figures began to coalesce from the radiant green light. They weren't solid, not flesh and blood, but shimmering, semi-transparent forms, impossibly tall and slender, like distortions in the very air. They moved with an unsettling, purposeful slowness, their forms causing the cornstalks to part and shrivel instantly as they passed, as if their mere presence drained the life from the land. These weren't creatures from another galaxy. They were elemental, ancient guardians, or perhaps terrifying projections of the awakened entity itself. Brody's blood ran cold. The figures, silent and utterly devoid of expression, began to move, not randomly, but with a horrifying, synchronized precision, slowly, deliberately, towards the nearest farmhouses, the very homes the newer crop circles had encircled. The purpose of the intricate patterns, the warnings, the hum, the shriveling corn, it all clicked into place with a sickening finality. The crop circles weren't just a signal. They were guiding this awakened presence, drawing invisible lines, marking territory, and the harvest that was about to begin wouldn't be of corn, but of something far, far more primal. As the first tendrils of dawn stretched across the Kansas sky, painting the east in hues of bruised purple and sickly orange, the green light from the mound slowly began to recede, sinking back into the earth from which it came. The hum faded, replaced by an eerie, profound silence. Nothing remained but the colossal, now dead, intricate crop circle, its stalks withered to brittle husks, and the chilling, empty spaces where the figures had passed. The air, though no longer humming, felt heavy with a sense of immense, ancient dread. The entity, whatever it was, had gone back to its slumber, but its presence lingered, a terrifying promise etched into the very soil of Havenwood. They hadn't solved a mystery. They had merely witnessed a truth far older and more terrifying than they could have imagined. And as Brody, Sarah, and Dr. Reed stood there, staring at the silent, dead fields, they knew one thing for certain. The earth had indeed fought back, and the harvest in Havenwood had only just begun.